No, I just paused record. All right, I'm getting you back. All right, Paul Asdale out in California.
Hey guys, apologize on camera. I'm in transit with my 1-year-old daughter. My name is Paul Asdale. I'm the Chief of Hockey Operations with the Junior Rain Hockey Club. We have facilities in Riverside, Carlsbad, Paramount, and 275 in our club. But then within the rinks, there's probably a couple hundred each, so probably up to 600 to 800 players.
Okay, very cool.
Awesome. We got a great group, Amanda. These guys are rock stars, real leaders in our industry, and really hungry for information. And as I told Amanda too, not only are you guys interested in information, you guys actually put it to work. And that's the one thing we respect about you guys. Heather, why don't you give us a real brief recap, introduce Amanda, and we'll get rolling.
All right. So for everybody that was on the call, or for those that were not on the call, we basically kind of did a like a 3,000-foot overview of the fun maps. Talked about what exactly, how they were developed. So we went into the community, asked kids to define, players, parents, and coaches to define what makes playing sports fun for kids. They were able to identify 81 specific actions and behaviors that define and make up fun in sports. They organized them into 11 fun factors. And I'm pretty sure you got the handout, I think. And we also talked about what exactly, like, how does it look like? What does that look like in practices? So we showed a couple of videos showing different types of drills. So in old style, flow drill compared to a more game-like small area game or small-sided game. And, how you can elicit certain behaviors like trying hard, working hard by just structuring the environment to make sure that we're pulling that behavior out of them rather than forcing them to work hard because they're trying to avoid getting yelled at by our coaches. So we just briefly talked about that and had a pretty good discussion. And did I miss anything, Joe? Does that sound about good?
Oh, that's pretty good. And then I sent out the follow-up for a lot of the questions that the guys had.
Right.
And
Yep.
did you guys be able to identify or point anything from that, or we'll move on to that as we get going?
Probably move on to that as we get going. I mean, Amanda, I sent that over to you. I guess I didn't check you to make sure that you
What's
have
that?
in front of you. The feedback.
Yeah, I got it from Joe.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So, okay.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to introduce Amanda. So if you have anything else before I do that.
I see Brian Copeland just jumped on. And so
Yeah.
Brian is in. Oh, go ahead, Brian. Just want to introduce yourself and tell us how many kids you have.
Yeah, sorry guys, the roads are a mess here right now. Brian Copeland, Executive Director for Colorado Springs Tigers. I'm also the coach in chief here in Colorado. We've got just under, all including with Pueblo Tier 1 down, we've got about 650 kids in the club.
Nice.
Okay, Heather. Okay, Heather, if you want to introduce Amanda.
Yeah. So this is Amanda J. Visek. She's an associate. Yeah, very important. She's an associate professor in the Department of Exercise and Nutrition Sciences at the Milken Institute in George Washington University. She's been there, in her words, a long time, since 2007. And she actually was my professor and introduced me to the field of sports psychology, kind of opened up that world for me. So she's been a mentor of mine, and we've worked on, and actually, so she's the principal investigator of the fun map. So she actually was the one responsible for garnering over about $500,000 for a 3-year study in federal funding, which is, like I said before, a huge deal because our federal government doesn't typically fund sport research. And so she was able to secure that funding, and that's where I started working with her, was on that. So we've been spreading the fun word together for about 7 years now. And yeah. If I have missed anything, she's published a lot of papers. She's very important. She's a pretty good dancer too.
So I think,
Right?
So I think, Amanda, Heather gave a really good background on kind of what fun is. I think the good direction maybe to head from here is like how to implement, how to help coach it, how to get this concept that you've documented, how do we bring it alive within our clubs? And again, guys, this is your call, so the discussion's coming from you guys, and you guys have at it.
Well, let me, I think what might help is to just give a little bit more background on where I've come from and how I've kind of landed here, if that makes sense. So I grew up primarily in my younger childhood years overseas. So I'm an Army brat at heart. And I grew up playing all kinds of sports, Little League baseball, what have you. And it was when we got stationed back over stateside that my brother and I really kind of took up winter sports, so specifically ice hockey, and for me it was figure skating. But we were both exposed to getting onto the ice and to that whole, what became our whole world when we were actually stationed in Germany. And so all throughout growing up, sport was just like a huge part of our life. Just, I mean, I think, you know, that goes without saying for all of us that are on this call right now. And so I did my undergraduate training at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I majored in exercise and sport science and psychology. And then went on to a doctoral graduate program at West Virginia University, where I got a master's degree in sports psychology, a master's degree in clinical counseling, and then a doctoral degree in sport and exercise psychology. And for me, it was really about sort of the intersection and marriage of these two really cool areas of study, right? So sport and then psychology and performance. And then when I came to GW, from a research standpoint, it's how do we do translational research in a way that is really meaningful and impactful, right? So my background in doctoral training has really been on the applied side of actually working with sport programs, league administrators, coaches, parents, and one-on-one doing sports psychology with kids all the way up to, you know, collegiate, Olympic, elite athletes as well. So research for me was really about coming at it from a practice side of it, which is how do we take really good research that's being done and implement it in a way that can have profound impact, whether it's improving performance, it's keeping kids or athletes generally speaking in the game longer. And one of the things that I found as an applied practitioner doing sports psychology, whether it was with youth athletes or very oftentimes with college athletes, when they would come into my office and one of the, you know, we talk about, you know, why are you here? What do you want to work on? And so often it's that they wanted to have fun again, right? That they had sort of lost the passion that had been there for such a large part, and then it was gone. And so there's this sort of applied piece to it, but then there's the research piece to it as well. And so when you look at the literature, the research literature to guide us as practitioners, there's really nothing, or there was really nothing out there to help guide us in, as coaches, creating more fun sport experiences where kids would want to stay engaged, they were highly motivated. All these other models out there that talk about motivation, achievement, goal orientation, all of these different things, but nothing that really kind of distilled down to what fun was for kids. And so as Heather had alluded to before, as a professor here at George Washington, one of my big plights is to secure funding to support the research agendas that we have. And so by coming at it from that frame point and being able to frame fun as the number one reason why kids play, right? It's the number one reason why they stay in the game, and its absence is the number one reason why they drop out. So fortunately, I was able to convince the federal government to give us this funding to do this really cool, innovative research. And so for me, it's really about taking the science and then finding ways and working with people like you who have direct impact on a day-to-day level to influence the experiences of these kids in a positive way that wants to keep them in the game. That's the way that we grow the game. That's the way that we advance athletic development. It's the way that we do everything, really. So that's sort of the standpoint that I'm coming from. I think to kind of get you all engaged a little bit in the conversation right now would be to do a quick pop quiz, because Joe said that everyone did their homework. They weren't on the call last time, and Heather nicely alluded to some of the answers here in terms of highlighting what are some of the most important things for kids. But can anyone just sort of like recall really quickly, what are those what are those 11 fun factors that she had shared last time?
Competency.
Okay, competency. Do we agree, disagree? Would we call it something different?
I think it was trying hard and doing your best.
Okay,
was
trying
number
hard.
one.
Trying hard.
Team dynamics, positive coaching, learning and improving games, practices, team friendships, mental bonuses, game time support, team rituals, and swag.
Okay, who's
Somebody's reading notes.
Brian?
We'll open up the email, Brian.
If I don't take notes, I have a hard time with retention.
Wait. Amanda was about ready to say Brian is going to lead us. You finish that sentence, Amanda. I'm really curious.
Yeah. No, Dwight though, you like Dwight's the competency, right? So that's important, because you could say that competency is a fun factor, right? But that's the language that we use, right? And that's the language that, you know, you pick up book chapters or you read different theories and things like that. That's what we generally call it, or mastery, right? So one of the really cool things and the power behind the research that I've been able to do with the fun maps is that it puts the language and the data directly in the hands and the voices of the kids, right? So when they're talking about distilling down what is fun, they're using words like trying hard and learning and improving, right? Which all then map onto this greater concept of what competency is. So they really did a phenomenal job of being able to really distill it down into those 81 specific determinants that Heather had showcased on the last call. So what I can do right here, go ahead and share my screen.
Practices today.
Did. Absolutely did. Right, so this is what you're seeing here, right? So we have the 11 fun factors, right, that are kind of in this kind of pinwheel, right? So if you look at it clockwise, right, we have trying hard followed by positive team dynamics, positive coaching, learning and improving, et cetera, et cetera. Everything that Brian had sort of nicely laid out for us there from his wonderful note taking.
Nice research, Brian.
Right, and so this is sort of that aerial, sort of high level visual, if you will, that that Heather was kind of alluding to last time. And so I think, is this something that you've already shared, Heather?
Yeah, this one I showed them last time.
You did show them last time. Okay. I only heard the audio recording, didn't actually see the video. Okay.
Really missed out.
Yeah, so everything that you have here, this is basically an infographic of 2 scientific papers that we've been able to distill down into one image, right? So this gives you that aerial view of what the sort of conglomeration of the different fun maps that came together in the bottom right-hand corner there. And then all of the fun factors, the 11 fun factors, followed by all of the determinants within each of those factors, right? So from a practical standpoint, I would say that kids did a phenomenal job, right, at basically distilling down every possible action and behavior that creates fun for them. And we have these really sophisticated maps that are easy to understand. And we have this wonderful infographic here that breaks everything down. And so, you know, this sort of becomes like the back of our hand, this infographic here, that's really helpful, right? And so if you guys have the opportunity to meet Heather, she's always like pulling it out of her backpack. It's like the first thing there, whether it's, you know, at the rink or at the bar or wherever it is, it's there, right? So, but this is the roadmap, right? This is a fun sort of visually understandable way to really kind of understand what fun is. But the flip side of it is that it can be, for adults, it can be quite overwhelming, right? This idea that there's 81 things, there's these 11 factors. How do I remember and retain all of this information, right? So part of what I've started to try and do is to translate this from an adult learning perspective, how we tend to chunk information, right? And how can we do a better job, both as scientists and practitioners, but also as executive directors, in communicating this data-driven knowledge that we have. So this is sort of a work in progress here. But as you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, what I've started to do is basically break this down into to-dos, right? Coaches want to know, what do I do? League administrators, executive directors, you want to know, what do I do, right? So as much as the last slide is really helpful in breaking down every nuance, we have to be able to start to chunk it into pieces of information that are easier for people to understand. So with this infographic here, if we start with development, right? So based upon your reading of the chapter, being on the call or watching the call from last month with Heather, we fundamentally know that the foundation of fun is really about development. That's what the kids are talking about, right? So that's why I have the asterisk here up at the top. So that's fundamentally, that is the outcome, that is the process and the outcome of what fun is. How do we then go about actually creating that experience for kids, right? Well, if we look at the fun maps and we can extract the data from it, then we know that fun is a physical experience, right? And the more that we can chunk this science down into sort of 3 things that we can get administrators, coaches, parents to understand, it becomes much easier, right? So when we're talking about the physical experience, we're talking about giving kids playing time, right? Allowing them the opportunity to compete, keeping them active and working and moving, right? It's not fun sitting on the sideline or the bench or propped up against the board waiting for your turn, right? It's touches on the puck. So when you think about, how do I create an experience that is fun for kids, you have to think about the physical piece of it, right? The tactical, very kinesthetic aspect of it. The second is that fun is a verbal experience, right? So this means that we're providing positive feedback and encouragement. Our communication when we're talking to kids, it's very clear, it's concise, but what we're also doing is that as we're coaching, right, we're educating. What is the best ways in which to educate is to question rather than to direct, right? So by doing that, you can foster game competence, hockey IQ, soccer IQ, whatever it is. That's the way in which we start to do this, right? It also means that, you know, you have other stakeholders on the ice. So it's not just the verbal communication that kids are giving to one another and that the coach is relaying to the kids, but it's also that we have well-educated refs that can make consistent calls as well, right? So fun is now very much a verbal experience. When we talk about the emotional experience of fun, how do we foster that, right? Through active listening as coaches. That is one of the best ways in which we can build rapport with the kids that we're coaching. How do we really get to know our kids? By actively listening, right? Creating psychological and emotional safety, right? Allowing mistakes. And then coming back to that verbal piece of it, right? And how do you do that? Through positive feedback, encouragement, right? Giving them the confidence that they can. And so it comes back to building player confidence in this way as well. So we have this physical, verbal, and emotional experience. Fun is also very social, right? So here we're talking about facilitating a supportive environment. So not just the coach supporting the kids, but the kids supporting one another as well. That social experience, when we talk about actionable things that we can do, has a very physical and kind of tactile experience to it as well, through high-fiving, fist bumping, hugging, cheering. All of that is a big part of that social, those positive team dynamics that get fostered, right? That's where we get the social bonds and the relationships and the friendships. The other is doing things outside the game as a team, right? That's a big way in which, as sports psychologists, that when we work with different teams, we do a lot of, you know, different team building activities and different things inside training, outside training, that foster those positive team dynamics and relationships as well, right? Then we have the environmental aspect. So we're talking about having well-organized practices that include small-sided games and drills, right? Those things are then going to foster a lot of all of the physical aspects of the game that you're trying to give kids that experience in as well. So the way in which we structure and organize things and implement it has a profound influence then on the physical part of the game. Environmentally, also having good ice, playing in training conditions, right? I know growing up for me, we were spoiled in the sense that we had a not so cold rink, but we had phenomenal ice. Phenomenal ice. And we all know what playing on good ice, good fields, bad fields, and how that contributes and can kind of take away the experience. It's not something that we can always control, but it is an aspect of that environment that makes a difference. The third for environment is also playing against evenly matched teams, right? And that goes back to being able to then structure leagues, seasons in such a way that we give kids the best possible chances to succeed by matching them in a way that fosters greater competitiveness, right? So blowout games don't really do a whole lot might boost self-confidence for like 2 seconds, right? But other than that, they don't do a whole lot to advance athletic development, right? So we're talking about how do all of these things, right? The physical, the verbal, the emotional, the social, the environmental, then lead us to the developmental outcomes that we're all looking and trying to achieve. So very oftentimes I find that if we can start to talk about fun as development, and you're talking to kids, you're talking to, or rather you're talking to the coaches, you're talking to parents, right? It's this sense of development. Everyone wants their kid to get better. And so if we can start with development, which is fundamentally what fun is for kids, and then remember, okay, there's a physical component, verbal, emotional, social, environmental. There's 5 things, only 5 things that I have to remember. And in each of those, there's 3 punchlines, right? It makes all of this really rigorous science that many of us like to geek out on, right, into a form that is much easier for people to remember and then to implement.
So Amanda, I love how you broke this down. For us old guys, we define fun as, well, it was a fun practice, or it was a fun drill, or it was a fun activity, therefore there should be development. And what you're saying is fun is the fuel for all 5 of these areas. And if you can connect all the areas, then you're getting true development. Where we often put fun on the outside as one topic, not in the middle of it as being the fuel. And I just want Amanda to pause here for a second and open it up to the guys. I mean, you know, emotional, building player confidence you have as a bullet point. That is tough. Is there any questions from you guys maybe about the bullet points or her circle here and how to create that development, or what you guys have seen or done? Is there any feedback here? Or should Amanda just keep going on, guys? You got any input?
Our biggest obstacle is that the fun bubble and the developmental bubble are switched. And it's trying to make people understand that it ultimately is the opposite. I'm not sure how it is in other areas, but in our demographic here, fun doesn't necessarily equate to a parent as development or advancement or competency, and it's a huge obstacle.
Yeah, and that's that's one of the biggest myths, right? So fun gets sort of dichotomized in 2 different ways, right? So people either talk about how fun has to be a part of practice, it has to be a part of games, it really is truly integral and kind of the cornerstone of a player's experience, right? The other is that they talk about it as if it's like a bad thing, right? It's the F word that nobody wants to say or do, right? And if you're having fun, or not if you're having fun, but if you want to have fun, then you need to go play on the house league, right? Not the travel league, right? Mm-hmm. So, which essentially then dichotomizes it as good or bad, right? And so what we have found through the research, though, is that fun is universally experienced, right? So I'll just kind of pop over to my main sort of messaging here. So, you know, people like to talk about, you know, what are the take-home messages? I like to say, what are the take-back messages, right? You guys are executive directors. You're going to take this knowledge and information back. And what are the key points that we really want to understand? So, and then we can drill back and come back to kind of the infographic from before. But I think to Dwight's point here. So really understanding what fun means to young athletes, right? Athletic development. So we have the science now that dispels this myth that fun is goofing off, that it's not being on task, that it is mutually exclusive from athletic development, right? So now we actually have that data that tells us that. And before this study, we didn't have that anywhere, in the literature, anywhere at all, right? And so if you go back to the big infographic that Heather had shared before, the big aerial view that's got pretty much everything on it, right? If you really, really study that, then you fundamentally know that it is athletic development. So part of it is when we talk about these light bulb moments and understanding what fun is, A, it's athletic development. B, we have the science to support it, right? And we have the science that comes directly from the kids, right? So you know the adage, you know, out of the mouths of babes, or the mouths of kids. This is what they told us, and this is what they created in terms of the fun maps. The second is that they're universally similar, right? So this kind of goes back to what was talked about before in terms of the fun experience, right? So if we go back here, this, right? Development that's composed of the physical aspects of the game, the verbal, the emotional, the social, the environmental. Universally the same for girls and boys, rec and travel, younger and older kids, right? So I think Heather had shared some of the pattern match data before that gave you all the visual sort of understanding of how incredibly close these kids, no matter how you group and stratify them, are saying fun is exactly the same, and what is most important to us is exactly the same, right? And all the components of trying hard, positive team dynamics, positive coaching, which compose 28 specific fun determinants, that's what's most important, right? So it's universally similar. So just this basic understanding that athletic development is fun, and fun is athletic development. These are not mutually exclusive things. And that what we're trying to provide for kids, if we're talking about developing athletes, is providing the same type of experience for them and not treating them different, right? So on the one side of the bulb, we have, okay, here's our understanding, athletic development, it's universally similar. What do I need to be aware of, right? Cognitive errors, right? So why do we think that girls and boys are different when it comes to fun, or that the house kids are different from the travel kids? Because they look different, right? Our mind's eye, our actual visual eye, sees that girls and boys visually are very distinct. So they must be completely different, right? In their wants, their needs, their priorities. And they're not. And a lot of what we perceive to be differences are cultural norms and stereotypes that we as adults impose on kids. We then create these cognitive errors, right? And so this goes back to fundamentally, how does the brain work? So we're talking about fun that we've thought of in lots of different ways. And now we're trying to understand, how do we talk about it in a very factual, data-driven way that is true, right? So it means that we have to actually start to change the way in which we talk about these things. So if we can become more aware of the cognitive errors that we as humans make, and we make them every day, and we make them about all kinds of things, because when you look at all of the scientific evidence across developmental psychology, biology, neuroscience, all of these different fields, girls and boys are fundamentally the same. Their wants, their desires, how they function. What we do is we tend to perpetuate these subtleties that we see, and we make them more pronounced than they actually are. That then creates the cognitive errors that we then take with us through life and impose on children. We also tend to make errors when listening to kids, right? And so even when we think that we're actively listening, because we hear kids talk about like, oh, I want I want this stick. This stick is the best stick, or I want these skates, right? And they want the newest, the latest swag. Very often, especially parents, end up being blown away that swag and things related to equipment and uniforms and things like that end up being at the bottom of the list when it comes to what's most important. And that's because we make this human error, which is called an availability heuristic. It means the things that we just hear over and over again, we just then assign value to and say, oh, that must be really, really important. When in fact, when you ask kids what is most important to them, then we can actually decipher greatest to least, and we find that it's not as important as we think it is, even though we hear it all the time. So these are basic human errors that we all make in day-to-day life. And so when we talk about truly understanding what fun is, we're talking about overriding the way in which we have been programmed to sort of think about what fun is. And one of the most basic ways in which we can start to do that is changing our language, right? So I always say words matter. So fundamentally, the words that we choose and how we frame them has a profound influence on building players' confidence, on mobilizing changes in behavior, on motivating kids, right? The same thing goes for our universal understanding of what fun is. So as long as we keep saying, well, we need to provide kids with player development and fun, then what we've essentially done is we've dichotomized those two things into two different buckets, which means that they're categorically different. That's what has just been communicated to our audience by framing it that way. But if we can start to say, no, we need to provide experiences that challenge kids, right? That get them to really compete and to try hard, because that is fun. So instead of dichotomizing these things, we need to bring them together under one umbrella, if that makes sense. I don't even remember what the question was originally. I think we were back here somewhere. Dwight was the one that, I think it was about competence or something, right?
Where fun and development were switched for a lot of people.
Yeah. Is that Brian?
Yeah.
He's taking good notes.
I have a real world question here for in Colorado, and Sean Hathaway can appreciate this as well. In the state, our state affiliate creates a ranking system, and that ranking system uses game scores from only games get played against in-state teams who are at the same division. So for instance, all PWB games against other Colorado PWB teams. That ranking system is then used to determine the top 4 teams in each division go to a state championship, and the rest go to what they call an Avs Cup, Avalanche Cup. Bantam and older, like I get, Pee-wee becomes questionable for me, but absolutely it squirts. It has conditioned these parents at when their kids are 9 years old to be worried about in-state rankings more than fun and development. And Sean had a real world experience with that last week at a practice. So what message can we take back to our state affiliate to use some of this information and data to try and get them to get away from things that are serving parents and move more towards things that are serving players?
New leadership.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Do they
It's a
care
great-
about, real quick,
Go-
Amanda, do they
go
care
ahead,
about
Heather.
like how Finland and Sweden don't do rankings until like 14U
Well,
because
I probably interject on this because this has hit our program pretty hard. We've got we work with FIHA with Finland. We bring over our students from Virmaki every year. So I've got a Finnish coach embedded within our program. And this year the last 2 years have been rough. This year it's kind of, everything is just sort of blown up, and my Finnish coach is just shaking his head, like laughing. I mean, so essentially we've been trying to push the development side, that this is about development and the wins and losses don't matter. The Dio Cope was talking about last week, as I was running some skating drills, working on our kids' skating strides, and a mother stopped practice, mid-practice, opened up the door and literally stepped on the ice to ask me to come over. And
Yeah.
it never happened to me before. I skated over and I said, yeah, what's going on? Thinking there was something wrong. And she said, well, I'm just wondering, is the head coach going to run the rest of practice? Because we have games this weekend and we need to be preparing for those games. This is our sports. These are 9 and 10-year-old kids. And we're up there, we're in first place in our league. And, so our parents are watching these rankings on a daily basis, and everything is now about winning. It's all about competition. We've got to make it to that Final Four. We've had success up here, but that success has not been because we focused on competition. It's because we focused on the development, and the winning is taking care of itself. The ranking systems in the state have kind of destroyed that, what we're building. And certainly I've got to go on a public relations campaign up here to redefine what this development is as it relates to fun, what, the importance of competition versus fun. And the parents right now are all about, it's only fun if we're winning. And it's gotten ugly. So.
Yeah. It's a systemic problem, right? So, I mean, Brian, it's a great question. And it's something that, in order for a cultural change like that to occur, has to be addressed systemically from lots of different levels, right? So you can't just do the top down, and you can't just do the bottom up. You have to hit it from every single standpoint. And that's just, I think that's one of the things that has become illuminated really in the work, sort of looking at the fun maps here, and then also sort of cross-pollinating that into Sweden and looking at their sport culture, both in ice hockey and basketball, but globally as well within their country, and how different it is. And there's, not that they don't have some of the same problems that we have here in America, and it's starting to, kind of become a growing, trickle effect. But they still do a much better job at development and focusing on the process versus the outcome. And that's part of the problem, and that's part of, one of the things that we have to do a better job at is parent education. Every NGB, every, sport organization on regional and local levels, it's something that we all have to do a better job at. And we're, you guys as administrators know that you're up against sort of adequate staff, resources, time, money, all of those things.
Amanda, can I ask you a question about, I totally get what you're saying. Have you ever taken this research, this questionnaire that you've given to these kids, and you've gotten all this data about what fun means to them? Have you done the same studies, or would you consider doing the same questionnaire to parents and seeing, well, what do the scores come back for parents? Let's rank where the parents' perceptions are as parents is what having fun is. I'd be curious to see how different those results would be with the kids, and attacking it then in a way to say, listen, you guys have got this completely backwards.
Yeah.
Your results indicate that you've lost complete touch of reality with what is being processed by your kids.
Yeah.
That would bridge the gap.
No, that's a great question. And we have, and that was part of, when I was originally conceptualizing this study, one might say, well, kids are, it's the kids' game, and it is, right? But when we talk about youth sport, the two other primary stakeholders that influence that experience profoundly is coaches and parents, right? So in the original FunMap study, we engaged coaches and parents as well. So we have that data. And interestingly enough, when you look at the players and the parents do a pretty good job at their understanding of what fun is and sort of the rank ordering understanding of what's most important to kids, much better than coaches did. I think Heather had shared some of that data on the last call.
The players versus coaches I did, not the players versus parents though.
Oh, you didn't share, yeah. Because it's not as that data was a little surprising in terms of how well correlated they were.
But we also asked though, like, what do you think is most important for your kids? Not what do you think is most important, which I don't know if that would have,
Sure.
that would have, made things
Yeah, the subtle nuance. Mm-hmm.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you ever want to do another data set, it'd be interesting to see how the Aspen parents and kids would do. So let me know. I'd love to give questionnaires to all my players and parents.
Okay, I'm gonna write your name down. Who else is signing up for?
Hey,
It's much easier to get to Colorado Springs than Aspen. Just throwing it out there.
Hey, the
Brian,
we-
you're
hey,
coming
hold
the
on.
weather's way nicer in Dallas,
All right.
and we have a lot of places to dance.
No,
No,
Hey, hold
we'll
on,
do it
time
in
out.
Vegas.
Time out. Yeah, Val. Time out here.
I have a quick question,
Wait,
but go ahead, Joe.
Hold on, Dwight. So we're up
Yeah.
on 60 minutes. I kind of mentioned to Amanda it'd be a 60-minute deal. This is going fantastic. Amanda, do you mind if we continue maybe for a couple more minutes and let some more questions flow?
Yeah, so Joe actually put this in my calendar as 2 hours. So I
No.
have 2 hours blocked
Okay.
up.
All right.
So
Well,
I'm good. I'm good.
this is fantastic, Amanda, and I know
Yeah.
the brains of these guys are starting to move, and I can see them thinking. So this is when it'll get good. But I want to be respectful to Amanda. But let's go for some more questions and see how it goes. Thanks, Amanda. Go ahead, Dwight.
Yeah, absolutely.
What effect does economics and investment play in this as well?
So we have we actually have data. So here in front of you right now, you have the fund maps. In year 2 of the project, we actually mapped what is not fun, or all of the things that get in the way of fun. And I believe family finances or economics in some form or fashion was on there.
It was.
And actually had a meeting about that data last week. Let me just look at it real quick. Yeah, so one of the we call them barriers to fun. So there are 81 determinants of fun that the kids organized in 11 fun factors. When we mapped what is not fun, there's a whole not fun map. The kids identified 91 barriers, so 91 things that get in the way of fun. They organized that into 12 factors. And not having enough money for equipment, fees, etc., is one of the barriers that was organized or categorized as family challenges. So in terms of where that ranks or falls, actually I would say, okay, I haven't been in this data as much recently, so pardon my pause here. But family challenges is in the top 4, the top 6. The top 6 factors that get in the way of fun. Where that financial component actually falls in the rank order of the 91, I don't know yet, but we can look at that and I can get back to you.
Dwight, what are you asking? Are you asking in terms of how much money a parent has, like the
Well, no, I look at our environment here, and if a coach steps out on a limb, for crying out loud, and has a fun practice or what is perceived to be fun, a parent who's paid $5,500 to $8,000 might perceive it as not serious, not developmental. And so compared to as if it was a drop-in or a free program, I see less scrutiny when we run our 4-week free program as compared to our 8-week hockey academy, which has a price tag. I see way less scrutiny. Parents are enjoying the fact of seeing their child on the ice, but as soon as they pay $10 for a class, now they're more interested in making sure that kid isn't eating snow, making sure that it looks like it has a purpose, all of these things. And so that I'm just trying to figure out what how much of an impact that economical factor has on us being able to even do the right thing a lot of times.
Well, so I think part of it goes back to what doing the right thing looks like, right? And so I think the clips that Heather showed on the last call last month do a really great sort of visual illustration of what that looks like, right? And so by juxtaposing something that is not fun to a drill that is fun and is highly engaging, is competitive, the kids get lots of touches on the puck, and that is fun because it's development, right? So part of it is going back to, yes, we have to change the language that we're using. Yes, we have to do a better job at parent education, but we also just have to do a better job at providing more fun experiences in our training. And that doesn't mean standing around goofing off, but we as well fall victim to the right side of the screen, right? Because the parents are talking, if you're in Sweden, it's translated as barking, back at you with that messaging, right? That's just full of myths and fallacies. So we almost have to take extra concerted effort to then override the messaging that we're receiving in order to communicate back in a way that's going to appease parents.
I think having those visual representations also, so videos and that kind of messaging that says, learning looks messy. I think that having those flow drills that look super neat, or you have the 5-on-0 breakout where kids are making tape to tape passes and they're breaking out of their zone, uncontested. It looks pretty, it looks neat until it doesn't. But then like that makes coaches feel good about themselves. That makes parents feel good that the kids are actually doing something that looks like hockey, right? So it's, I think, educating the parents that like learning is chaotic, learning is messy, learning is failing over and over again until they actually start to do it correctly, and putting them in those situations where they're going to fail in practice, like having like that conversation with parents of like, we want them to fail in practice. We want to challenge them as much as we possibly can and make it as game-like as possible, because these are the situations that they're going to see when it comes to actually playing the game. So how do we structure that in our practice? It's going to look messy. It's going to look disorganized and chaotic, but that's what learning looks like. That's what development looks like. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if it's maybe, like having a parent education campaign where we have videos that show like, this is what development is supposed to look like. This is what challenge is supposed to look like. This is like what transferability will, this is where it happens. This is where we create that transferability.
So Heather, you're dead on. You're dead on with parent communication and defining this. And I'm gonna jump off on that. So this is my question to the directors. In your opinion, directors, how many volunteer coaches, moms and dads that work, that come to the rink on a volunteer basis, are equipped to deliver physical, verbal, emotional, social, and environmental fun. All 5 components. And we've been kicking it around, and I know what my opinion would be, but how do you then develop the coach and the parents ultimately, but really the coach, because they're the first line of contact. I mean, that's a professional coach, somebody who can deliver all 5 of those things at a high level. So as a director, do you guys, that's the issue, isn't it?
Yeah, if we're developing our coaches correctly, teaching them these things that the research is driving, then we're going to have success, are we not? I mean, but the problem is holding your coaches accountable and making sure that, and again, Amanda, looking at the data, if you're saying the data, the coaches are actually opposite of the players, that shows that.
The coaches are actually, what would you say, Sean?
I don't know if putting words in your mouth, but kind of opposite in terms of how what the data revealed, that the coaches aren't as in sync as the parents are with the results from the kids, correct? So if the coaches are in sync with the players and their instruction, the curriculum and their instruction and the 5 avenues, however we define that, matches the outcome of what the kids find as fun, then we're going to have success. So we just need to align essentially what the kids want with what we're providing.
Right.
And that just boils down to how do we train our coaches to ensure that that becomes the focus? What's the process?
I mean, the other thing to think about and a strategy to try when communicating with parents is to actually, I kind of cringe when I say this because it's not helpful towards righting the wrong messaging when it comes to fun, but it's almost like don't use the word fun, use the word development. And then use the science, the fun maps, all the other science that's being done that says this is what fun is because this is what a development is. And I know that as a coach, or I know that as an executive director. And we're going to build our programs around this, but the way that it's communicated to parents, the messaging is development.
100%.
So part of it is like, you have to think from a business standpoint, we think about parents because sport, like hockey is for kids, it's for the players, right? But who's financing that? It's the parents. So you almost have to kind of look at it from the angle that the parents are the consumers. And so how do you tailor your words and your messaging and your delivery in such a way that shapes them the way that you want them, that gets them over here? And so I think part of that might be through changing the way that we do that.
I agree, but disagree. So like, why are we, first of all, why coach the parents? Right? I'm not an adult, I'm not doing adult education. I'm doing child education. So first and foremost, I'm going to apply these principles to teaching the kids. And I do honestly believe if you do a good job there, the kids will put the parents in their own place. So when the parent starts to squabble a little bit in the car on the way home, the kid will tell the parent to knock it off.
Not always. Sometimes. Some kids do. Some kids do. And some kids don't. And those are the kids that I think that we end up losing as well.
I don't think kids get that courage until later in life, until it's too late.
One of the biggest obstacles we have here is that we have youth coaches that are essentially professional. They pay their mortgage by coaching these hockey teams.
Yep.
And the only way, and the parents are the judge and the jury. They're also the customer. Yep. And they make references to coaches based on a lot of different factors, but one prominent one is success. And so as a coach, and these guys are not dumb, they appease parents before they would appease players because that's their livelihood. Mm-hmm. And it breaks things down immensely, and it doesn't create the right environment that you want. But that's the biggest challenge we have in our area for sure, is that there's no more volunteer coach. These guys are professional coaches that are full-time coaches.
Yep.
And again, the parent is the judge and the jury.
Who's paying their bill though? Because I'd love to be
The parent.
No, but the parent's paying the coaches' salaries.
Yes.
See, that's a
Well,
problem.
the parents paying the association,
Okay.
Sean,
So
but the association pays the coach.
Sean,
just wait a sec. And the thing about Dallas is that they have 10 different associations to choose from.
Right.
So if you want to keep a happy customer, it's not like we're the only team in town. So the association really gets stuck in a difficult situation.
I hear you, Dwight. I would go back to Tyson. I kind of surprised me a little bit, Tyson. I do believe we're in the customer service. And I do, from a personal experience, the year that I ignored parents, it was not good. Overeducate, communicate with parents, over-communicate, and then still deliver that to the kids. To me, that's the winning combo. Kids only, I think it's a little bit of a gamble, but the more you educate the parents and show them value in their investment, to me, you're going to eliminate headaches and issues and distractions. Not all of them, but most of them. Go ahead, Heather.
How many, this is just a question, how many clubs, how many of you guys have like a vision statement and values that you have set for your club? Do you have, do any of you guys have that?
Yeah, we do.
Is that something that you permeate throughout your club?
You know, we try. I mean, our big thing is about character development. I mean, that's really what we lead with, is the ultimate, our mission and our goals are based on the development of character. Certainly the challenges that we have is it's a very, and especially in this town with the affluent people that live here and have kids, you know, they equate winning, okay, as the predictor of success. And if my kid, number one, is on the A team and number two is in first place in the league, then I'm a worthwhile parent.
Right.
And that's just the way some of the affluent people here have lived. They are winners in their minds. And so my kid needs to be a winner. That doesn't mean, and again, that they're winning at skill development, that they're becoming competent at all the things they need to become competent before they're 12 and they can't learn those things anymore. But that's the challenge, right? I mean,
right.
How do I convince? And I went out to the warming room after that woman stopped me last week and had a conversation with her about, look, you know, the skating needs work and they have until they're 12, according to the research. And we need to be focusing on skill and not winning games. And at the end of the day, you know, she walks away with a bad attitude, and that's what we're constantly dealing with. But that's the challenge of trying to take the adult constructs. I mean, I was talking to Joe about squirts and going half ice, and the biggest issue we're going to have if we do the right thing and go half ice development with squirts is, how do we take care of all the adult constructs? How are we going to deal with sharing the benches, the scoreboard? What does the divider look like? Does it still look like the NHL? And all those are the adult issues that we have to get past so that we can actually have some influence over the kids' development. And if we can't get past the adult stuff, whatever their expectations are, then we're failing to do what's right by our kids, period.
Hey guys, Joe, Heather, I have a few comments. A lot of good stuff there, guys. It seems to be a similar problem, right? Is education, parent education. I would, you know, and having core values and a vision is critical, I think, to change culture.
Mhm.
And to change culture, sometimes you have to do it one by one. So unfortunately, we are in the customer service business, and that unfortunately means we deal with parents on a daily basis. And I think if we all on this call went the other way and went more transparent and went more to the side of education, break down your practice plans, show where the development is, all this stuff, I think you'll see change and slow change. And when we talk about wins and losses, I actually used to say wins and losses don't matter. Now I say wins matter and so do losses matter, because they both really matter in the big picture of things. If what we're trying to do is make an impact on kids' lives, and if, you know, whatever people's missions are and values are, the reality is we're trying to make impact in youth sports and make a experience for kids. And I think if you stick to that, and everyone chips away at it slowly, it's an uphill battle. We know that, but I think there's lots. I used to be the first person to never talk to any parents and actually get in conflicts with them all the time. And now the opposite comes to my mind is what we say is challenge with care. And they're not going to understand cross ice or why we play freeze tag and this and that. But if you challenge with care and you can show the proof, that's the winning ticket.
Well, and I think it's also changing the what is the return on investment, right? And so obviously parents are dedicating so much, financial, logistical, time, resources, right, that they're putting into this sport for their kids. So they're looking for, what is my return on investment, right? And so the easiest way to value, what is my return on investment is wins and losses. That's the easiest way. And so I think if you can develop a vision statement and have values, core values that are framed around development, then you start to shift the focus from my return on investment is not wins and losses. It's how is my player developing? And that's going to come through, I think, having more parent education, talking about this is what you're actually paying for. You're paying for development, because at the end of the day, especially, so I think boys, it's like you're not fully developed until you're 22 years old. Right? So how many kids are we kicking out of the system because they didn't make the AAA squirt team, when they're not even close to being fully developed? So it's taking that frame of like, this is my return on investment as a successful coach is wins and losses, and shifting it to my return on investment is how are my players being developed? What are the milestones that they're hitting? Maybe it's just reframing what that return on investment is, I think.
And Heather, the ROI is the gap, it's the progression, right? Where you are and where you want to get to. And
right.
If you can prove that gap, and it's always having that, 3 to 5 window in mind, that's the key. And obviously it's very hard for that, 9-year-old parent who lost the game by 10 on Sunday to do that, but that's our job.
Yeah.
Joe,
Yeah.
can I ask, I got to get off the call, Amanda. Thank you. Is it okay if I email with questions? If I cut a couple follow-up questions, not a problem?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Anytime.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Joe, for setting up.
Yep, see you, Sean.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean.
All right.
Hey, guys.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think at the very beginning, Dwight kind of nailed it when he said that fun and development are switched in that pinwheel diagram they showed at the beginning.
Yep.
Because I think that's the same thing we have here, right? Fun is on the outside. And, as I'm sitting listening to all of us talk, it kind of makes you think, well, fun is kind of almost like a throwaway word or a bad word because of coaches, right? We have a tough weekend, and then what do you tell the kids? Oh, we'll just have a fun practice next time. Don't worry, and then right away you make that, everybody has that assumption well, shit, this is a throwaway, coach said we're just going to have a fun practice, and that means, they're just going to play games, and then it all gets in that bad context, where, especially for me out here in Vegas with a lot of the parents, if you do a 2-on-1 200-foot drill, the parent actually can see that and they think that you're teaching something. If you do a small area game with a safe zone guy or a common man and you're creating 2-on-1s all over, most of the parents is here that I deal with can't see that. They just think they're playing a game. So you basically do have to kind of educate them into, like was said before, show your practice plan and break down the game for the parents, because they do. And I think a lot of it, like I said, is because of our word choice, like they showed in that other, or the one on there now, it's the coaches. We choose to use the word fun as a throwaway skate,
No, that's an excellent example, Paul. And that's why I say words matter, right? And they matter in more influential and profound ways than we are aware of in the moment that we say them very often, right? Because they just become a part of the everyday vernacular in that way. And that's part of what's really perpetuated this problem when it comes to understanding that fun is athletic development. And that's why we're sort of climbing this sort of uphill battle in trying to override that. So part of it is just understanding, okay, why do we think the way that we do? And what are the errors that we make? And then being more intentional about the words that we use. And that doesn't just mean verbally, but it also means in our branding, our messaging, our newsletters, our emails out to parents, to coaches. It has to be everywhere so that there are all of these touch points, right? Where now parents, coaches, everyone, they're being exposed to what is actually factual. And it takes a lot of that.
Amanda, I was just going to add, a lot of us that have been around for a while we saw it firsthand when we went to 8U Cross Ice and the kids and the smiley faces and the sweaty heads. And we were there before when 8U played full ice, and it was painful. So we've been building on with the 10U half ice, with the games, with the different programming here with our skills coaches. And it's almost like our good coaches are coaching less and not over coaching and creating better environments. And so I think obviously USA Hockey's come a long way, but we are really, I think we've got a lot to build off of. So I think it'll be good.
Yeah, once we can get that data to you guys from Sweden, you know, they've done a ton of research and shown the different ice sizes, what's the best for development at different age groups. And so they're still analyzing it, but I think they're going to be willing to share it. And in, you know, true American fashion, we're going to go ahead and steal that and to try to, you know, make it better. So
question, in Sweden and Finland, do they ever refer to their kids' athletic development as a return on investment? You know what I mean? That's the thing that probably irritates me the most out of all this, is that like my parents growing up didn't even know the coach's name. Like dropped them off, kids having fun at the rink.
But how much did your parents pay for you to play hockey though?
Exactly right. Now, I mean, it was, you know, $175 back in North Dakota.
Right.
Middle of nowhere for the whole season. So now that we're getting into these astronomical prices, and
I mean, when I played 19U, my parents' ice bill was $500 a month, which was more than their mortgage.
Yeah.
You know, like
so that's the thing though. I'm just trying to, you know, talk about doing all these. In order to get a guy in our association or gal in our association to really buy into this, it's more a professional coach to really, you know, do the right things, and then you're jacking the price up. Now the parents are more involved emotionally, and I think the pendulum starts swinging that outside way again. So yeah, I it's kind of the, you know, damn if you do, damn if you don't kind of thing, right? You know, if you spend more money and jack the price up, it's going to be more of a scrutinized, or is it go the other direction? I don't know. We're trying to figure that out here because we're looking at getting a hockey director as well.
Yeah.
Which is going to increase the cost some more, and are we just going to build up that momentum?
Yeah.
So anyhow.
No, you guys aren't in an easy position.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
So let's do this, Amanda. You're fantastic. I'm going to leave Amanda with some closing words and some thoughts. Goodbye, and then I'll wrap it up in 2 seconds to be cognizant of everybody's time. And today's call is fascinating, Amanda. Well done, and I know we're going to get a lot of a ripple effect off of this. So,
good.
All right, Amanda, say your goodbyes and last couple comments, and we'll shut this down.
Oh, you want me to deliver this? I thought you were going to like here's like as the discussant, here the big, you know,
okay, well,
big facts. And
well, I will say this. I'll say this for you. I know Amanda is interested in follow-up discussion with a lot of you guys. I know her and Heather are interested in putting some, getting maybe some access to your players, as we joked around earlier. So I know a lot of you guys would be willing to help her out, and I'll just leave it at that. I'll have a follow-up call with Amanda and Heather. Maybe we'll identify some of you guys as clubs if I reach out and contact you, and we can talk details, maybe to move forward to help Amanda, to maybe give back to her to help her out with her studies. That might happen in the future here. But no, to me, some of the things that stuck out was that fun is the fuel of development. It's not a piece of it.
Yeah.
And it's the hockey director's challenge to educate parents and coaches and players really what true development looks like. And it's not just a drill. It's not just winning a game. And I love what Paul Esdale said. It's a challenge with care. And I think wins and losses are important, but if it's in context of that wheel of the fun map, with fun being the center, you're going to eliminate a lot of problems and you can deliver high level youth sport experience that's going to help you out. That was my takeaway. So any last thoughts for the guys, for Amanda or Heather? Okay. And then guys, great call, great attendance today. I'll probably follow up with you guys individually and just hear some of your thoughts on the call. I know I owe a couple of you guys a phone call. And then, you know what, let's, good luck on the end of your season. I know everyone's hectic from President's Day, and I know you guys all got states and nationals and everything coming up. So good luck with all that business. Hopefully in March and April, we have time to relax and decompress and maybe do a season review like we did last year. And I'm also thinking about Bob Mancini gave an unbelievable presentation in Florida regarding Frolunda. And somebody said it earlier on our call. I think Sean said it about, you know, we have up until 12 to develop kids. And Bob's latest thing is there's a huge development window. I talked to Tyson about it at 16, 17, 18, and 19. And that's really what he's discovered in Frolunda. So yeah, I think it'd be a great phone call. He's got a PowerPoint presentation for it, and his son Victor's over there, and he'd be willing to share some of the things that he's seeing in Frolunda in terms of high level development for the post-teen hockey player. So, but good stuff. Any questions on that or any parting thoughts from anybody? No?
Matt and Heather, feel free to jump on this call anytime. You guys are fantastic.
Oh,
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I actually would like to know at some point, doesn't have to be today, but I know some of you mentioned your girls programs, and I think my territory is going to be the west side of the country. So we need to touch base on that. So
Great.
I'll probably be joining you guys more often.
That'd be awesome.
Good.
Sorry, I just invited myself on, Joe.
Welcome to the board, Heather. I feel the same way. I feel the same way about you. So well, good job, guys. We'll see you next month.
Wait, one final thing is, so I would just sort of think about, I think, to some of the points that that Paul had made and Dell and Dwight as well. Think about, so when you're doing your job, right, and you're interacting with parents or you're interacting with coaches, and think about like what kind of data would help you in your job, right? So what I find is it doesn't matter whether I am talking to sport organizations, irrespective of country, if I'm in the classroom teaching, if I'm in a board meeting, you know, sitting on an executive board, if whatever my messaging is, if I have data that backs it up, it shuts people down, right? And that's sort of the buy-in. So my, I guess, challenge would be for you guys to think about from the fun aspect, like what would be most helpful, right? That's really what should drive research. In the real world, what would be most helpful? So that when you are out there with your messaging and you're having these conversations, what is the data that you need that would get the parents where you want them, that would get the coaches where you want them, to create the culture that you want in your programs? And then we figure out the practical nuances of how we make that happen.
Okay, you might open yourself up to another phone call, Amanda.
That's okay. That's okay.
All right.
This is good stuff. No, I just want to say, you know, thank you to Joe for inviting me on here, and for Heather for, you know, doing a fantastic job of giving you guys an introduction to everything that I've been working on, that we've been working on, and it's been a good time.
Very good stuff.
All right. Thanks, Amanda, immensely. Great call today. And we'll see everybody next month. Thanks so much.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye all.
See you guys.
Thank you. Take care.